Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm Sil Scaglione. Like Michael said, I'm the Chief Development Officer here at Lehigh Valley Public Media. And just to define what that is PBS 39, 91.3 WLVR, our radio station. And what we're here to talk about today, which is LehighValleyNews.com, which is our new local not-for-profit news site that we launched in early October, only a couple of months ago. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a little bit of the background as to why we did this and how we got here. Yoni's going to talk about that. He's also going to explain exactly what our intentions are with the site, the kind of news that we're covering. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our business model is, because it's highly dependent on philanthropic donations, as well as a few other categories. So I'm going to share that with you. And like Michael said, let's have this be a conversation. Feel free to jump in at any time and ask a question. We'd be more than happy to stop down and answer that. But, after we go through the presentation, there'll be lots of time for Q&A as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Yoni Greenbaum. Yoni, as Michael said, is our Chief Operating Officer. In addition to that, he heads all of content for all three of our channels, and has spent an enormous amount of time studying the local news in the local journalism situation in many markets across the country. What we're suffering from here in the Lehigh Valley with the lack of local news coverage and the demise of it over the past number of years, we're not alone. It's not unique to the Valley. It's happening in many cities, both large and not so large. So Yoni's got a tremendous amount of insight that he can share with you as well. And with that, Yoni, take it away.
Cool. Thank you, Sil. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today. So just a quick piece of background. I joined Lehigh Valley Public Media 5 years ago. And when I got interviewed by the board, I said we would never do news, that news is highly commoditized, it's everywhere, it's expensive, we're just not going to do it. But it took about 6 months to realize that the Valley was in a bad place, that the current news organizations just were no longer satisfying the needs of the residents of the Valley. So at that time, we took a step back and we launched what's over my shoulder, Lehigh Valley News Tonight, which was a nightly 30-minute newscast. It aired at 6 p.m. and at 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. It quickly became the #1 late news in the Valley at 11 p.m. And I think it actually did a lot of good. We told the story of thousands of organizations who never saw themselves on TV before. We gave people the type of news and information that I would argue makes them better parents, husbands, wives, grandparents, spouses, or just residents of the Valley. But along the way, we started to realize that while we were feeling good about the product, we weren't convinced the product was doing everything for the community that we thought it should be. So we did the right fiduciary thing. We shut it down, we stepped back, and we pivoted to research. We did 2 studies. We did a 500-person brand study, and we did about a 3,000-person news consumption study. Those studies told us a lot of what we thought, that people really were frustrated with the legacy news organizations, that there was deep trust in PBS and in NPR, that people were truly interested in local news information. Actually, the surprising piece was people, respondents 25 to 49, answered more so than anyone else that they really wanted more local news and information. People also told us that they were willing to add another source into their daily routine, and in many cases that they'd be willing to pay something towards that news and that daily news source. So we took that information. We then took a look at about 24 of the 400 nonprofit news entities that operate right now in the US. Organizations like the Texas Tribune or the City in New York, or Politico. Politico is probably one of the most well-known but least recognized such entities, and ProPublica, and use that as the model to then build what is now LehighValleyNews.com. So LehighValleyNews.com is a nonprofit news organization. We've committed that our daily news, breaking news, and investigative content will be free every day in perpetuity. We ask people to register. We've tried to make it as frictionless as possible. So registration is an email address and a name. And at that point, you get that continued access for free. You also get access to our newsletters. On top of that, we have Lehigh Valley Plus, which is a premium offering. And Lehigh Valley Plus gives those members who subscribe to that access to additional video and audio content, other content, events, and best of all, that that membership is tax exempt, tax deductible. Sorry. To accomplish this, we're hiring upwards of 24 journalists who will cover everything from cities like Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton to broader communities such as the East Penn School District, the Parkland School District, to topics like health and wellness, criminal justice, environment. And you know what we're trying to do is do this different than others in the market. So for example, as you see on this list on the right side, we're covering business and labor. Typically, a lot of news organizations just cover business, which tends to have the perspective of the owner. But one thing we all share in common, I think, in many cases, is we're employees. We're part of the labor side. So by covering business and labor, you're telling the true story, the full picture of the business and labor in the Valley. So there's more that we can get into. Health and wellness, you know, is a topic that we started covering with News Tonight, and we've continued to. And I would propose that Brittany Sweeney, our health and wellness reporter, covers this better than just about anybody in the market right now. When I looked around, I noticed early on that you know, the Morning Call and Lehigh Valley Live no longer cover health as a regular beat. Same thing with environment. You know, there's lots of different ways of looking at environment. Traditional news organizations tend to look at environment and throw under that development. And therefore, development always becomes a four-letter word, a negative. We're trying to step back and tell the full picture. It's important to note, and some of you have heard me say this in the past, Bob Godomsky, for example, we really feel that our job is not to tell you or the readers or the users of LehighValleyNews.com what to think or how to think. Our job, our mission, is to give you the information to be able to think for yourselves. So that means that we're here to present both sides of the issue. We're here to provide deep transparency. So that means not only including when a subject is a funder and making that clear, but also asking the questions to ensure that the person we're interviewing, for example, to provide feedback on the political candidate, doesn't have a family member who's also working on that campaign. So it's a deeper level of transparency. Our news team is led by Jim Deegan. Some of you may know that name. Jim helped build and ran Lehigh Valley Live and the Express Times. He's been in the Valley for over 25 years. He's been a journalist for over 30 years. So everybody who's involved, from Jim on down, you know, are skilled journalists with many, many years of journalism under their belt, and in many cases, many years in the Valley. I came to LehighValleyNews.com from NBC, where I ran digital for them in Philadelphia, running NBC 10 and Telemundo 62. Before that, I helped build and I ran Philly.com. And prior to that, I'd worked for News Corp and Dow Jones and Gannett and a number of other news organizations. And so what we've tried to really build on here is the success that is happening in many places across the country. And I think it's the concept of news really as a service. We see this as a way to fill the gap that we see growing in the Valley. The morning call, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here, is a shell of what it used to be. Lehigh Valley Live is a shell of what it used to be. Corporate ownership no longer has that local commitment. So for example, we broke the story a number of weeks ago about the Allentown superintendent leaving. And then we broke the story about the replacement. But we felt that there was more to that story and more of a service that we could provide the community. So we got together with the superintendent and the mayor of Allentown, and they agreed to join us for a community conversation that I think Dawn actually attended. We broadcast that to the Lehigh Valley Plus members and then the community at large. And we held the event at Miller Symphony Hall, right in Allentown, so anybody could attend. It was a free event. I think, and Dawn, correct me, we had about 40 people, maybe 50 people. And you know, I think that's in the spirit and the mission of what we intend to do, is making that news and information truly accessible, and something then that people can rely on, and you know, and honestly can use to find out what's going on in their communities. I mean, what we've heard a lot and what we've seen is, in many cases, we don't know what's happening in our own communities until, for example, the tax bill arrives in the mail, or unless we read about it on Facebook or on Twitter. And what we're really trying to do is replace that. To an extent, almost, I would often go back in time to when, you know, you knew your local reporter. You know, if you saw them in the supermarket, you can go and talk to them. If you saw them at the Little League game, you can have a conversation. Starting in January, our reporters will actually be working out of offices throughout the Valley, in city halls, in other places where they actually are accessible to the public. So, you know, if somebody's got a complaint, a story idea, a suggestion, they can come and they can have that conversation. The idea behind the model is, you know, when you look across the country, really what you see is typically a heavy paywall structure. So the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, right? You got to pay. That gives you that access. You know, some people, you know, do a free model where there's a lot of advertising. We've tried really to do a hybrid, and I think Sil's going to talk more about that later. But one of the benefits, I think, to the Valley and to our readers is really evident in this chart. We all know the experience when you go to the morning call. The morning call has upwards of 12 to 16 ads on a page. They've got videos that autoplay. They got the video player, right, that follows you around as you move down the page. It's very intrusive. Lehigh Valley Live is the same way. I think FMZ, last time I checked, when you open up WFMZ's website, you see one story at the top because there's so much advertising around it. Our site, there's 4 to 5 ads on the page. There's no autoplay video. There's no video player that follows you around. The content is king. And usability is significantly important to us. And that's something that we've really thought hard and long about. Because we've used research at the outset, we've continued to use research. This is not just Yoni's site. It's not just Sil's site. To be honest, this site is really your site. This site reflects what people told us they wanted and what people continue to tell us that they want. You know, one of the things we did not have, for example, when we launched was weather. We thought that, you know, we all get weather on our cell phones nowadays. There's weather all over. But we very quickly were told, you need weather. I want weather. I want a one-stop. And so we've added in a weather widget. We're adding in a weather camera. We're adding in more weather technology. And then, not surprisingly, the last 2 days, weather has been the #1 traffic driver. And I'll admit, I'm surprised because there's lots of places we can get weather. But I think people are starting to get used to coming to lehighvalleynews.com for the local news. And it's really that one-stop shop then. They get the weather information while they're there. So we're learning as we go. As Sil mentioned, we launched October 3rd. So we're about, 74 days into what is going to be a very long journey. We haven't gotten everything right, but we're learning and we're applying as we go along. We're working with great technology. So we're working with the content management system that kind of is the back end of the site. That's also powering PBS and NPR and nonprofit news sites, as well as organizations like the LA Times and San Diego Union Tribune and Walmart. So a really, really strong company there. We're using cutting edge artificial intelligence technology from a company called Piano. Their website's piano.io. They're Philadelphia based. They were the very first paywall vendor in the country. They were a company called TinyPass, and they power the newsletters. They're the reason why your experience on the front page, Dawn, may be different than Andrew's experience, because we're using that intelligence to provide you with the information that we think is going to be more relevant to you in particular. One of the things I saw in working in newspapers is that too often the front page of the newspaper was decided by the front page of the newspaper was designed by 4 white men who would go into a room at about 5 o'clock and say, these are the stories that will matter to our very diverse audience. And then the next day they get really upset when the newspaper didn't sell. We don't have crystal balls. We don't know it all. And we've got a strong digital team of 6 digital journalists. They all live in the community, but they don't represent the full community. So relying on AI, relying on predictive technology allows us to customize the content and make sure that it truly is working for the visitors. We're very metric based. So we are tracking every aspect of the site throughout the day to ensure that content is placed in the right place, that the headlines are appropriate and accurate, and that they're working, that the photos are working. And we're really looking at where content falls along the continuum of registration and membership. We think this can be transformative for the Lehigh Valley and also transformative for LehighValleyNews.com. Over 5 years, we believe that we can bring on upwards of 150 to 200,000 registered users and probably 22,000 members. Right now, Lehigh Valley PBS39, for example, has about 11,000 members. So that's a real healthy growth over that 5 years. We see the number of events we're doing similar to the Allentown superintendent community conversation. We see that growing so that there'll be those events every month on topics that matter, whether it's health and wellness, whether it's prenatal care, whether it's food insecurity, the challenges facing our schools. Fortunately, I don't think, it's not that there's not enough issues. It's just whether or not there's enough time to get to all of those. There's definitely topics that out of the gate we're not going to be able to cover that we really want to. I would love to be able to see a religion reporter. I would love to be able to see a nonprofit reporter. The Valley has a tremendous depth in nonprofits, organizations doing great work. I would love to be able to cover that more and really tell those stories. And we also want to tell the stories of the people of the Valley. There are people who are really making a difference in their community on their block every day. We hear about this somewhat from organizations like Promise Neighborhood and from Dawn's organization, but there's lots of others who are flying under that radar and who I think really do deserve to get that attention. And just the last thing I say before I'll turn it over to Sil is, in addition to the research, which has really guided us in making the choices for what you see when you visit the site and what we cover, we continue to talk and learn from our colleagues at other nonprofit news organizations. The Baltimore Banner, which recently launched, we talk to them on a regular basis. The Lookout San Diego, the Daily Memphian is a great nonprofit news organization in Memphis, Tennessee. It's really encouraging that everybody's really willing to share their learning. We all want to see everything increase and all of us be successful. And just the truly last piece, is that the goal here is not, and I'll just get to this in case anybody wonders, the goal is not to put anybody else out of business. Actually, what I'm hoping is this will be a wake-up call for the Morning Call and Lehigh Valley Live. I think the best thing for the Valley would be a robust local news ecosystem with lots of different voices telling lots of different stories. And if we can, by what we're doing, motivate, encourage, embarrass the Morning Call and Lehigh Valley Live to do a better job, I think we'll be much better. I think the worst thing that could happen to the Valley is if we're the only one. That's not going to provide us with the type of Valley we want or the type of news ecosystem. Sil?
Thanks, Yoni. A couple of things that I'm going to add before we open it up to questions. I wanted to share with everybody. Whoops, let me get my screen here. Right. I wanted to talk a moment about how we're marketing and promoting LehighValleyNews.com. So for us, look, we've been around for over 50 years, and this is by far the most significant investment this organization has ever made. The commitment of money in particular to start this operation up the first couple of years is significant, and that's something that we're taking responsibility to a large degree to fund. I'll talk about the other funders in a moment. But we've budgeted just over $600,000 just in the first year to launch this, and that doesn't count the media that we'll use on our sister properties, PBS39 and 91.3 WLVR, to promote this. We're relying on digital heavily as far as our spending is concerned. We think that's the smart thing to do given the demographic and given the nature of the product. Our message is get more local. That's really our mantra. It is about being hyper local, right? So, we don't have any national news per se on the site. We'll talk about topics that are of national importance, but what we'll cover is how it affects the people of the Valley. So what's going on in the country, around the world, we'll take it back to how does it affect folks in the Valley. So we launched our marketing in conjunction with the launch of the site. It will continue on a regular basis. We started with billboards. We're rolling out some transit, and because the demographic is 25 to 49, as I look around the room, myself included, I don't necessarily see a lot of the ads just because of the demographic. However, we are opening that up a bit as well because we are a mass appeal site, but we really do want to focus on what we describe as a younger demographic, because we think that those are the folks that will shape the community today and tomorrow. And then the other thing that I wanted to share with everybody is our business model, right? So we are a not-for-profit. The site is free, which makes it very unique in that respect. So, how do we sustain ourselves? How are we able to deliver this product for years to come? So the model is a little bit unique and different in some respects to some of the other nonprofit news sites across the country. Like those other sites, we will rely heavily on personal and corporate philanthropic support. To that point, one of the things that our board asked us to do as a proof of concept, after we completed the research, and the research clearly said that there was a need for what we had in mind. They wanted us to prove that there was a significant amount of interest in the business community, in the philanthropic community, to support this. So at the beginning of the year, in less than 120 days, we were able to raise just over $1 million in philanthropic support to help launch this. Most of that money came from individuals. About a third of it came from corporations and business owners. And we're really proud that we were able to do that in a short period of time, but it also told us, it gave us a huge vote of confidence. Although that was a wonderful start, in order for us to sustain ourselves, we will continue to rely heavily on that support, which clearly is a big part of the reason why we're here speaking to you today. In addition to that, grants are an important part of the mix. However, there are other not-for-profit news sites that rely much more heavily than we will on grants. The reason being, grants, it's tough to secure grant money year in and year out for projects like this. Grant money is available to help with the launch of these things, but it's only to get you going, right? Then it's up to the organization to find ways to sustain itself beyond that. There is a premium membership level. That is something else that we'll rely on as well too. However, because the site, is free, there'll be a subset of members that will want to become premium members and get access to some things that won't necessarily be made available for free to the rest of the market. Like Yoni said, our daily news, our breaking news, our investigative journalism will always be free. There's some neat things that we're currently doing and more that will come under the premium model, which will include direct access to the reporters, access to Passport, which is the PBS streaming platform, invitations to exclusive events, and invitations to view a particular video. And there's some other things that we have in mind as well as the property begins to mature. And then finally, we are making available sponsorships and a limited amount of advertising. That's something, the advertising piece in particular is a little bit different than what the other sites are doing across the country. We think that advertising is okay. We think if it's done in moderation, it's done tastefully, and it's not intrusive, that's going to help us become more sustainable in the years to come, and we won't have to be overly reliant on some of the other channels. And finally, I'll leave you with this, and then we'll open it up for questions. We need support. Although we're making a significant investment on our own, and there was some generosity in the beginning to help to get this off the ground, we continue to need philanthropic support. Most all of the not-for-profit sites that we've studied across the country, the local community foundations play a major role in underwriting these efforts. Our understanding here in the Valley, it's a little bit different, right? A lot of the funds within this organization here are donor directed, right? There's not the kind of discretionary funding like there is in some of the other community foundations across the country. So our appeal is to you individually and to the organizations and family offices that you represent. There could be some very specific things that you could help us fund. Yoni mentioned earlier, endowed beat reporters. whether it be like a couple of examples he threw out, right? We're not-for-profit religion. You know, Yoni and Jim would love to have 50 reporters. You know, the more news and coverage we can provide to the community, the better the community will be. And then on the other hand, aside from philanthropic contributions from either individuals or corporations, there's sponsorship and advertising. So if you own a business or you know somebody who owns a business, we'd love to be able to talk to them about the variety of sponsorship opportunities that are available, and as well as advertising.